Blood Vow of the Iron-Masked Omega. Chapter 1, The Survivor's Mask. The heavy sledgehammer struck the iron anvil in continuous, deafening blows, reverberating against the damp stone walls of the vast palace dungeon. Inside that suffocating space, the rhythmic puffing and crackling of the forge fire, along with the sizzling of burning charcoal whenever cold water was dashed upon it, created a cacophony of sound that besieged the slaves. In the deepest depths of the royal fortress, where the sunlight never reached, there was only the stench of red-hot iron, the odor of dying charcoal embers, and the stifling smell of sweat. The steady dripping of water onto the freezing stone floor had been the sole companion to Iris for over a decade. Each falling drop was like the hand of an invisible clock, counting down the days and months she had to bury her youth beneath the bowels of the wolf fortress. Iris knelt on the stone floor, her hands grasping a cold short sword, but the chill from the iron mask upon her face was far more terrifying. It encased her completely from the top of her forehead down to her chin, heavy, gray, leaving only 2 small cuts for her eyes and a few tiny punctures to breathe. Every time she inhaled, her chest tightened in suffocation. Every time she exhaled, her breath brushed against the cold iron layer, creating a painful contrast right upon her flesh, condensing into droplets that streaked down her neck like tears. The monotonous silence of the forge was abruptly ripped apart by heavy footsteps, the clinking of iron chains dragging across the floor, and the familiar, mocking laughter of the palace guards. This kingdom worshipped strength, purity of bloodline, and the seductive sense that displayed the power of a clan, but Iris possessed nothing. She looked like an outcast monster among a pack of proud wolves, all because of this grotesque metal mask. They called her a soulless wolf, a worthless omega who could not emit any scent to find a mate. The humiliation from the pack battered her ears every day, as heavy as buckets of cold water thrown straight at her face. She could only choose silence as her sole survival strategy, clutching her slender shoulders to keep herself from trembling against the brutal shoves of the other maidservants whenever they passed by. A gruff voice barked out as the overseer stepped forward, the butt of his leather strike striking hard against the forge beside her, forcing her back, out of the way, you scentless freak. The short sword slipped from her hands, clattering along the stone floor. The oppressive aura of a beta warrior made Iris's chest constrict, her iron mask scraped slightly against the rough stone edge of the hearth, letting out a dull, choking thud. The colossus of an overseer, reeking of oily sweat, looked down at her from his height with utter disdain. He used the butt of his strike to hoist the chin of her mask, forcing her to face his ridicule. 10 years working here, and I've never caught a single whiff of a scent from you. No omega scent, and not a damn wolf soul either. Even a crippled wild wolf knows how to howl, while you only know how to stay mute behind this sheet of iron. A true stain on the tribe. Iris did not utter a sound. Through the 2 small cuts of the mask, her eyes were calm to the point of coldness. She did not look at him, she looked down at the ground, where a small, scrawny figure was trembling as he crawled over, trying to retrieve the short sword for her. It was Toby, her biological younger brother. A 12-year-old child whose body was nothing but skin and bones from malnutrition, his back covered in strike welts he had willingly taken in his sister's stead. The boy used his small frame to shield Iris, his voice cracking with fear but filled with resolve. Don't touch her. You are not allowed to lay a hand on Sister Iris. The overseer laughed out loud, his laughter echoing against the stone walls, sounding cruel and hollow. You siblings are nothing but trash. If it weren't for the council's order to keep these 2 slave lives alive, I would have thrown you to the starved beasts in the forest long ago. He spat a glob of phlegm at Iris's feet, then turned and walked away, his curses fading down the corridor. The moment his shadow vanished around the bend, Iris immediately pulled Toby into her arms. Her hands, calloused from forging steel, caressed her brother's tangled hair. The boy sniffled, his tiny fingers trembling as they lightly touched the iron groove on her cheekbone, asking softly, Sister, does it hurt? When can we finally take this off? I want to see your face. The Lapassaways in the palace say you have the face of a monster, but I know it's not true. Iris held her brother's shoulders tightly, her voice low but steady as it resonated from behind the iron mask. "Toby, look at me. Listen very carefully. No matter what anyone says, no matter what happens, you must never touch this mask. This is not a humiliation. This is the shield for our survival. Understood?" The boy looked deep into his sister's steadfast eyes and nodded slightly. Iris pressed him tight against her chest, her gaze fiercely piercing into the dying fire in the hearth. No one in this kingdom knew that behind that cold iron mask, supreme blood was flowing with immense pride, and the mask was also the final life-preserving lock that her late mother had used the last of her failing strength to forge. The iron mask did not just conceal a beautiful countenance, it locked away the purest cleansing energy in the world, the only thing that could quench the flames of the dark fire curse burning Alpha King Gideon night after night. She was hiding a treasure that could upend the entire kingdom, right under the guise of the lowest slave. Suddenly, the surrounding space went dead silent. The crackling forge fire gradually passed away down and then went out completely. A bleak, ominous aura flooded in, bearing the scent of withered flowers and barren earth. This chill did not belong to winter, it was dark magic heralding the arrival of the ruler of shadows behind the throne. Iris's face paled, she whispered and shoved her brother hard into a dark corner. "Toby, hide behind the coal bin. Right now." The sound of heavy silk robes sweeping across the damp stone floor emitted a haunting rustle that pierced the eardrums. From the shadows of the stone steps, a woman of exquisite, malicious beauty appeared. High which Maeve stepped down, clad in a black cloak embroidered with shimmering gold thread runes. Her skin was as smooth as jade, her delicate face flawless, yet her smile was laced with venom. Her presence at the palace was originally to inspect the weakening of Alpha King Gideon, but her calculating footsteps had led her straight toward this dark dungeon. The dark aura emanating from her caused the surrounding servants to instantly press their faces against the stone floor, not daring to breathe heavily. Only Iris stood still, her hands gripping her coarse skirt to keep herself upright before the woman who had slaughtered her entire clan. Maeve drew closer, her cold eyes, deep as the abyss, pinning straight into Iris. Her slender fingers, adorned with exquisite gold rings, lightly grazed the iron mask, sending a shiver down the spine. She tilted her head, leaning close to Iris's ear, uttering whispers as sharp as knives, reminding her of the old clan debt and the brutal game of suffering she had orchestrated. 10 years? You have hidden behind this piece of scrap iron quite well, Iris. Iris maintained her bowed posture, her hands tightening around her coarse skirt to stop herself from shaking. She chose silence, the patient silence of a hidden hunter. Maeve took another step forward, the distance so close that the noble yet dark scent of dried lilies on her person enveloped the space. "Do you know where I just came from? I was just in the bedchamber of the great Gideon. Your supreme Alpha King is writhing day and night in agonizing pain from the dark fire I bestowed upon him. That throne is slowly rotting right beneath his feet. He roars, clawing at the stone floor like a wild beast backed into a corner." Maeve laughed, an elegant yet sinister laugh, her sharp, shrill laughter echoing against the stone walls before dying out. She leaned in even closer, asserting a cruel truth in a mocking tone. "Iris, the cleansing blood behind your mask is the only thing that can extinguish the dark fire to save him. But you will never dare to take this mask off. Because this game is very fair. The moment a single drop of your blood touches Gideon's flesh, the dark fire curse will instantly snap your poor brother's soul. He will bear the damnation in his stead." In this game, Maeve had no need for leather strikes or iron chains, she only needed to turn Iris into a mere bystander, forcing her to watch her destined man be destroyed every single day without ever being permitted to touch him. Iris took a deep breath, feeling the bone-chilling cold of the iron layer clinging to her flesh. Her eyes looked up through the cuts, there was no fear or pleading, only a terrifying coldness erupting through her words. "Did you come all the way here just to say these redundant words, Maeve?" Maeve paused for a beat at her resolve, and then that malicious smile bloomed once more on her beautiful face. "I came to remind you of your place. Keep wearing this monster's mask, keep enduring the humiliation of the pack, and watch him fade away. That is the price for your clan's defiance. She turned and walked away, her dark robe sweeping across the ground with a haunting rustle. The witch's shrill laughter remained trapped between the stone walls, leaving Iris standing lonely in the dark. Only after her dark energy had drifted far away did the dungeon space return to the steady, slow, and freezing dripping of water. Iris stood up, her palms pressing tightly against the freezing iron mask, clearly feeling the pain and helplessness surging within her chest. Yet her gaze through the cuts still blazed with a resilient light. She looked toward the dark passageway leading up to the royal palace, where the Alpha King was being consumed by the flames hour by hour. She would not fall before she found a way out for both of them. From the dark corner, the forge hammers of the other slaves began to clang deafeningly once more, lingering before gradually fading into the deep night. Chapter 2: The Cursed Encounter. The palace night was plunged into utter horror. Low, agonizing roars ripped through the cold mist of the gray stone fortress, echoing down to the deepest dungeon levels where Iris and her brother were taking refuge. It was the voice of Alpha King Gideon. The brutal fever of the dark fire erupted more violently than ever, turning the supreme bedchamber into a battlefield blazing with black flames. The dark energy surging from the king's body incinerated the royal silk drapes and cracked the fortified stone pillars that had stood firm for centuries. The stench of ashes, the acrid odor of scorched stone, and the heavy smell of blood filled the space, suffocating anyone who dared to venture near. Many servants and royal guards who entered to offer aid could not withstand the terrifying psychological pressure from the uncontrolled aura of an Alpha King. They collapsed right at the threshold before they could even cry for help. When the firestorm temporarily subsided, leaving behind a ruined bedchamber that was suffocatingly stagnant, a beta guard, his face drained of all color, brutally shoved Iris inside. The heavy iron door slammed shut behind her, echoing with a cold and isolating thud. The guard stood outside, his voice trembling through the narrow cut of the door, filled with fear yet no shortage of threat. "Clean it up right now. If this bedchamber isn't spotless before dawn, or if His Majesty loses his mind again, your life and your brother's down in the dungeon will end right here." Iris stood in silence amidst the vast room, which was as empty as a cold golden cage. Her bare heels touched the hot layer of charcoal ashes on the stone floor. A burning sensation instantly shot straight to her brain, but her expression did not change in the slightest. The space was eerily quiet, save for the occasional collapse of ruins and the heavy, ragged gasps for breath coming from the dark corner of the large quartz bed. The scent of the Alpha King, the smell of burnt ancient pine wood, the pungent tang of iron, and even the panic-laced fear of an alpha wolf backed into a corner assaulted Iris's olfactory senses through the tiny breathing punctures of her mask. The alpha aura emanating from him was so powerful that it made her joints ache, tempting her knees to buckle. She gradually stepped forward, one step and then another, the faint rustle of her coarse skirt sweeping across the ash-covered stone floor being the only sound to break this suffocating silence. From the darkness, a tall figure emerged. It was Gideon. The lonely king of the Wolf Kingdom stood there, his bare chest heaving violently, marred with crisscrossing scars. Upon his skin, the black veins of the dark fire curse were still couthering like venomous serpents, emitting faint, hazy plumes of gray smoke. His eyes had completely lost all rationality, blood-red and blazing with the resentful fire of a wounded beast. He roared, his voice low and gravelly like cracking stone, harboring an aura capable of suffocating any mighty warrior. "Who permitted you to enter here? Begone before I tear you to pieces." He lunged forward with the speed of a wild beast, his large hand reaching out to clamp around Iris's throat, pinning her against the stone wall behind them. Her iron mask collided heavily with the wall, letting out a sharp, dry clang. His scorching breath, saturated with his agony, fanned straight into her face. His hand pressed deep into the skin of her neck. With just a fraction more force, he could make this lowly maidservant perish forever. In that moment of life and death, facing the ruler driven mad by the very curse brought upon him by the witch Maeve, Iris felt no fear. Through the two small cuts of her iron mask, she looked directly into Gideon's bloodshot eyes. She did not see a terrifying tyrant, she saw only a lonely soul, a child writhing within the prison of his own emotions. Instead of resisting or pleading, she merely pressed her bare palm gently against his cheek, which was burning hot with the toxic fever. She spoke, her voice echoing from behind the mask but carrying a strange weight, like cool water flowing through a desert. Stop. Do you know you are destroying yourself? Stop fighting that fire. The moment her bare palm touched his flesh, an invisible, pure, and chilling cleansing light from her supreme bloodline instantly permeated through the metal barrier, transferring straight into Gideon's body. That energy was as gentle as morning dew yet as powerful as a torrent, extinguishing the brutal dark fire wherever it traveled. The black veins on his face and chest began to recede, the gray smoke vanished into thin air. Gideon froze, his bloodshot eyes constricting as they gradually regained focus. The miraculous coolness from the ironclad maid's hand caused the wolf roaring inside his mind to instantly go silent. It was a sensation of profound relief that he had never obtained over the past 10 years, no matter how much medicine or dark magic he had employed. The cold, proud heart of the Supreme Alpha King was completely stripped of its emotional defenses before the gentleness of the woman whom the entire world looked down upon. He slowly loosened his grip on her throat, taking a step back. His eyes stared in bewilderment at her hand, then up at the grotesque iron mask. Gideon trembled, his voice cracking, yet he still strained to maintain his royal dignity. Who are you? Why do you possess no scent, yet your hand can soothe this fire? What have you done to me? Iris gently lowered her hand, her chest heaving behind the iron mask as she replied with an uncanny composure. I am merely a maidservant, Your Majesty. I did nothing, it was the fire within you that chose to fall silent on its own. Before Gideon could say anything more, his exhausted physical form after the prolonged fever caused him to stumble, collapsing onto the stone floor. Yet the intellect of a sharp, intelligent king still forced him to lift his head. He looked at the maidservant standing amidst the ashes, her countenance hidden by the iron mask, yet her eyes blazed with freedom and a resilient compassion. He realized very quickly that this scentless woman was the sole key to preserving his life and his throne against Maeve's conspiracies. Gideon forced himself up, his alpha aura enveloping the bedchamber once more, but this time without the brutality. It was a deeply possessive command, low, gravelly, and resolute. From this day forth, you no longer belong to the forge downstairs. Gather your belongings and bring them up here, you shall become my personal attendant. Iris stood frozen in surprise. She could not believe that the Supreme King who, moments ago, wanted to take her life could lower himself by a step and make such a swift, intelligent decision. His power was paramount, yet he chose to keep her by his side instead of imprisoning or interrogating her. Iris slowly knelt upon the ash-covered stone floor, bowing her head to accept her new status. As you command, Your Majesty. Maeve's game had begun to unfold its very first card. As the first light of dawn broke through the bedchamber windows, the snow upon the fortress roof began to melt, dripping onto the stone floor outside like an opening melody for the turbulent journey ahead. From the distant depths of the dungeon, the forge hammers of the other slaves began to clang deafeningly once more, lingering before gradually fading into thin air. Chapter 3: The Witch's Game. The soft rustling of deep red royal silk drapes swaying under the freezing wind blowing through the marble window was the only sound echoing within the vast bedchamber. The space here possessed a magnificent yet chilling beauty, luxurious but suffocating to the heart, like a golden cage devoid of warmth. The premium cedarwood scent used to incense the room desperately tried to cover up the acrid odor of scorched stone and the dark remnants of the previous night's furious storm. Iris stood silently in the corner of the room, her hands clasped together in front of her newly issued maidservant skirt. The coarse gray dress, though cleaner than the tattered one at the forge, constricted her chest, weighing heavily upon her no less than the iron mask that locked away her countenance and sent beneath the dull gray metal. Outside the stone corridor, relentless whispers of gossip, along with the contempt and indignation of courtiers and guards, echoed through the thick wooden cut of the door. The news that a scentless outcast, a worthless omega with a deformed face driven into the dark dungeon, had abruptly stepped into the Alpha King's bedchamber as his personal maidservant had shaken the entire Vong Tru. They viewed it as an insult to the proud royal bloodline. They did not understand, and no one dared to question the sudden decision of the young king. Iris heard all of those venomous words, but her eyes behind the cuts of the mask remained as flat and still as a winter lake. The fear of the Alpha King's supreme authority still lingered in her every breath, yet her chest twinged with a distant sensation, a secret compassion for the man sitting on the quartz armchair across the room. Last night, when she touched him, she had seen through the ultimate loneliness of a king imprisoned within his own throne, ruined by the dark magic his father had indirectly brought back due to the degeneracy of the previous generation. Gideon sat there, his jet-black royal cloak draped loosely over his broad shoulders, concealing the crisscrossing scars on his bare chest. His face had regained its inherent refined and sharp elegance of a ruler holding supreme power. His ash-gray eyes were cold and alert, bearing not a single trace of the crazed beast from the night before. He was an intelligent king, and that very intelligence was turning into a razor-sharp suspicion pinning straight into Iris. He spoke, his voice low and deep, resonating within the silent space. "What is your name?" Iris bowed her head, her raspy voice emitting from behind the iron seal. "The pack calls me Iris, Your Majesty." Gideon subtly raised an eyebrow. He stood up, his footsteps thudding evenly on the stone floor as he approached her. There was no act of violence, yet the natural alpha aura radiating from his body was like a colossal wall of pressure that made Iris's chest constrict, her knees trembling slightly beneath her gray skirt. He stopped directly in front of her, the distance so close that she could feel his breath, bearing the scent of cedarwood, fanning over the cold metal layer. "Iris." Gideon called her name, the sound like a sword being unsheathed. A scentless omega, without a wolf soul, yet capable of using a bare hand to extinguish the dark fire that all the most renowned healers in the kingdom were powerless against. "Do you expect me to believe this is a mere coincidence?" Iris held firmly to her boundaries. She knelt on one knee upon the stone floor, her head slightly bowed, but her voice did not waver in the slightest. "I am merely a lowly maidservant from the forge. Last night, Your Majesty ran a fever, and I only acted on the instinct of a creature wishing to survive. I possess no dark magic, nor do I hold any secrets that could threaten your throne." Gideon leaned down, his long, slender fingers hoisting the chin of her iron mask. The moment his flesh brushed against the metal layer, a sharp jolt of electricity, an unconscious craving from deep within his veins flared up once more. His body, his soul was screaming, demanding the cooling, soothing comfort from her palm just like the night before. The instinct of an alpha king recognized that she was the only thing keeping him alive, yet the rationality of a ruler warned him to be wary of her. He looked deep into her steadfast eyes through the iron cuts, growling, "What are you hiding behind this iron mask? A conspiracy? Or another curse?" "The thing behind this mask is merely a deformity, Your Majesty." Iris lied, her heart pounding with fear, but she was forced to protect the seal of her late mother. "It is my shackle, not a weapon." Gideon stared at her for a long time. His hand lightly squeezed the chin of the mask and then let go. He turned his back, trying to suppress the craving surging within his blood, tossing back a cold sentence, "Maintain your loyalty well, Iris. If I discover you are a pawn of another, this mask will become your coffin." From the high balcony of the Sunset Tower, where one could oversee the Alpha King's entire bedchamber through a blurred glass window, high which Maeve stood. Her black silk cloak fluttered gently in the wind, bearing the fragrance of premium dried lilies and elegant venomous poison. Her exquisite, cruel face showed not a single hint of anxiety upon seeing Iris promoted to Gideon's personal maidservant. On the contrary, a satisfied, smug smile bloomed on the lips of that deeply manipulative woman. Maeve lightly twisted the gold ring on her finger, her deep eyes gazing at Iris's silhouette through the glass. She thought to herself that this game of psychological suffering was playing out perfectly, exactly as she had orchestrated. The destined mates were now close to each other. Gideon's body would grow increasingly desperate and crazed for her. Yet Iris would never dare to offer her scent or a single drop of blood to completely liberate him. Because with just one slip, the moment she removed that iron mask to save her king, the life-linking curse would instantly activate, and her scrawny little brother down in the dark dungeon would have to bear the damnation instead. His soul would be burned to ashes. Maeve chuckled out loud, an elegant yet venom-filled laughter dissolving into the freezing air. Go on and stay beside each other, you two pathetic fools. Your proximity is the most cruel punishment I have reserved for the holy Omega lineage. Down in the bedchamber, Iris shivered slightly as a familiar, ominous dark energy brushed past. She looked up at the darkness outside the window, her bare hand gripping her gray skirt tightly. She knew she was walking on the edge of a blade, but the resilient light in her eyes did not burn out. Chapter 4: The Pain of the Lonely King. The sound of the night rain striking relentlessly against the towering marble window frames of the gray stone fortress was the sole sound dominating the space. The wind howled through narrow stone cuts, bringing the freezing chill of the northern winter, but inside the supreme bedchamber, the atmosphere was suffocating and scalding hot, like a sealed kiln. The crackling of pine wood in the fireplace flared up in anxious intervals, occasionally throwing up bright red sparks, casting distorted, elongated black shadows upon the cold stone walls. The premium cedarwood scent used to incense the room since the afternoon was now entirely overpowered by a terrifying odor, the scent of glowing scorched iron, the acrid smell of dying ashes, and the cold sweat exuding from the king's body. It was the scent of the dark fire, the witch's brutal curse flaring up once more in the dead of night, when the court had fallen into slumber and the entire palace fearfully shunned this place. Iris stood silently by the stone table, her hands clutching the rim of a deep brass basin. Inside, the cool water was infused with a few wild herbal sprigs she had secretly brought in from the riverbank, emitting a pure, gentle fragrance. The iron mask right against her cheek felt bone-chillingly colder than usual tonight, like a ruthless reminder of the survival boundary she was never permitted to cross. Through the two small cuts of the iron sheet, her eyes directed toward the large quartz bed resting deep in the dark corner. Gideon was there. The Supreme Alpha King, a man who with just a single glance could reduce the entire room to silence and force the dynasty to kneel, was currently writhing in a brutal, dark fever. The powerful royal cloak had been cast away onto the ruined stone floor. He lay on his side, his broad, bare, muscular chest heaving violently with every ragged, heavy breath. Beneath that firm, toned flesh, the black veins of the curse flared up once more, couthering abjectly and pulsing rhythmically like living creatures draining his vitality, emitting faint, scalding plumes of gray smoke. Iris carried the water basin, slowly stepping closer to the bed. The faint rustle of her coarse skirt sweeping across the stone floor was an incredibly soft sound, but it instantly caught the attention of the vigilant wolf within Gideon. He abruptly turned his head. His sharp, arrogant countenance, usually pristine, was now deathly pale, beads of sweat rolling down his temples and dripping onto the royal silk mattress. His ash-gray eyes, inherently cold as glacial ice, were now bloodshot, harboring a concealed, fractured panic and defensive wariness pushed to the absolute limit. Seeing the figure wearing the iron mask approaching, he strained to pull himself up, his broad shoulders trembling violently. His voice was low and gravelly like cracking stone, attempting to utilize what little remaining alpha aura he had left to drive her away. Begun. I gave the order, no one is to enter here tonight. Get out before I lose my mind. Iris did not retreat. The core persona of a holy Omega lineage kept her feet firmly planted. She knew that if she listened to him and departed tonight, that dark fire would incinerate his rationality, turning him into a monster exactly as Maeve had orchestrated. Enduring the psychological pressure weighing heavily upon her chest, she subtly tilted her head, her soft voice echoing from behind the mask, flat yet resolute. All the guards in the corridor have retreated due to your Majesty's aura. There is no one left but me, I am your personal maidservant. My duty is to remain by your side. Gideon paused for a beat, his bloodshot eyes pinning tightly onto her. He intended to say something harsher, but a sudden convulsion from his chest pulled him down, his hands gripping the stone rim of the bed tightly, his head hung low as his ragged gasps turned suffocating. Iris took another step forward, kneeling on one knee beside the edge of the bed. She wrung dry the soft silk cloth in the cool basin of water, and then, with utmost caution, raised her hand. The moment the cool cloth touched Gideon's scalding forehead, his body gave a violent shudder. The stark contrast between the chill of the water, the natural soothing freshness of the herbs, and the hot, ember-like heat upon his flesh created an intimate tension, suffocating the private space. Gideon, out of reflex, brought his large hand up and snapped around Iris's wrist. His grip was incredibly tight, causing her wrist to throb with pain, but this action did not carry physical brutality intended to injure. His hand was trembling. It was the desperate squeeze of a drowning man clinging to his sole lifeline. His scalding breath fanned straight into her bare palm. "Don't touch me," Gideon growled through gritted teeth, yet his eyes locked firmly onto hers behind the cuts of the mask, an unconscious craving for appeasement vividly evident in his gaze. "You do not know what this fire is. It will incinerate you as well." Iris looked deep into the fracture within his eyes. Her emotional intelligence and keen perception kicked in. She did not withdraw her hand, nor did she attempt to break free from his grip. She left her wrist within that burning palm, using the cloth to gently wipe away the sweat breaking out on the neck and bare shoulders of the king. She whispered, her voice as soft as a stream threading through sharp stones. "Your Majesty, I know how much it hurts. It is not merely burning your flesh, it is incinerating your very soul with the resentments of the past. You are bearing the consequences of mistakes that were not caused by you, correct?" Iris's question was like an arrow piercing straight through the proud defensive armor of the Alpha King. Gideon stared at her in utter bewilderment. For the past 10 years, the court only worshipped his strength, the royal council only demanded that he be an ever-victorious king, no one ever asked if he was in pain, no one knew what price he was paying. They only feared his transformation into a monster. Only this lowly maidservant, someone devoid of any aura, called out his pain with direct empathy. The grip on Iris's wrist gradually loosened, but he did not let go entirely. Instead, his hand slid down, his scalding fingers lightly brushing against her bare palm. Gideon let out a bitter, gravelly laugh, tilting his head back against the rim of the bed, his eyes staring up at the dark stone ceiling, exposing his absolute helplessness. "Mistakes. Indeed. My father, the arrogant former king of this realm, was mistaken. He thought claws and thrones were everything. He expanded territories, indulged in lavish luxury, and despised the spiritual roots of the pack. He betrayed the vow to protect the sacred forest, allowing the dark magic of the witches to infiltrate the veins of this dynasty." Gideon swallowed hard, his chest tightening as the black veins beneath his skin flared with a faint red glow once more. His voice grew fainter, harboring the deepest, innermost fear he had never dared to utter to a single soul. "My father passed away in the madness of this very fire. And before he perished, he handed this blood-soaked throne to me, along with the shackles of the curse. Now, every night, I hear the roar of the dark monster inside my head. It wants me crazed. It wants me to become a tyrannical, cruel tyrant, incinerating this kingdom, destroying my own bloodline. I am afraid, Iris. I am afraid that one day, I will entirely lose control and become the exact monster the curse desires. The strongest man in the kingdom, the Alpha King holding the power of life and death over an entire nation, was currently surrendering to his emotions, kneeling before his own fear in the darkness. He was no longer a king, he was merely a deeply traumatized life form in dire need of understanding. The compassion within Iris surged, she understood what he was forced to endure. Her clan had been annihilated by Maeve, and he too was being turned into a painful pawn by the witch. She would no longer stand by as an outsider. The sacred bond and empathy between them in this precise moment completely transcended the conventional boundaries of master and servant. Iris proactively turned her palm over, interlacing her bare, calloused yet cool fingers with Gideon's trembling ones. She raised her other hand, gently pressing her bare palm against his scalding cheek. She infused into that touch all the cleansing energy, natural soothing coolness, and emotional intelligence of a holy Omega. "Look at me, Gideon." Iris spoke, marking the very first time she addressed him directly by his name without using the title of Your Majesty, her voice carrying a powerful weight of boundaries that forced him to direct his gaze toward her. "You are not your father. You are Gideon. This throne may be soaked in blood, but your heart knows pain for the pack. That monster is only strong when you fear it and resist it with resentment. Stop fighting it. Let my coolness embrace you." The moment her bare palm pressed firmly against his cheek, a stream of pure, crisp cleansing energy, as refreshing as morning dew on a high mountain peak, immediately flowed across the boundary of their flesh. That invisible cool water gently pacified each engorged vein, extinguishing the brutal dark fire wherever it passed. The couthering black veins on Gideon's chest and face began to sink deep beneath his skin, the gray smoke vanishing entirely into the air. Gideon's breathing gradually stabilized. His bloodshot eyes constricted, regaining their clear, lucid ash-gray focus. The brutal fever vanished, leaving behind a sense of relaxation and serenity he had never obtained in all of the past 10 years. His physical form was exhausted, yet his spirit was remarkably at peace. He did not let go of her hand. In the stillness of the bedchamber, the sound of the rain outside seemed to recede. Gideon slowly lowered his head, resting his forehead against the small yet resilient shoulder of the iron-masked maidservant. He closed his eyes, savoring the faint scent of wild herbs emanating from her hand and the coolness enveloping his lonely soul. He whispered, his low voice resting close to her ear, completely devoid of any aura or royal distance. "Iris, I truly want you to be by my side forever." Iris stood silently in her kneeling posture beside the bed, allowing the arrogant Alpha King to lean against her shoulder. Her personal boundaries remained intact. She did not offer a verbal reply, yet her hand maintained its tight grip on his, delivering a silent protection. That night, within the cold palace of the royal court, two cursed souls had naturally found one another and begun to heal each other in the most primal way. As the first light of dawn shed the gray fog of the fortress, the rain stopped completely, the water droplets clinging to the glass window frames gently sliding down, reflecting the warm, early light of a new day. Chapter 5: The Protection of the King. The air within the grand royal hall was ever filled with the stench of power, deception, and conspiracies looming behind the deep crimson velvet drapes. Ever since the day Iris was appointed as the personal maidservant to Alpha King Gideon, the whispers of gossip had never ceased. To the pure-blooded nobility, the fact that a lowly outcast, wearing a grotesque iron mask and completely devoid of any scent like a normal Omega, could be in close proximity to the Supreme King was an insult to the dynasty. They were defiant, and more importantly, they wanted to see where the boundaries of Gideon's power and patience lay after the ravages of the dark fire fever. On a late afternoon, as the sallow twilight filtered through the stained glass windows of the adjacent cathedral, Iris was carrying a silver tray laden with parchment scrolls of royal records across the main corridor. Her soft footsteps were drowned out by the arrogant laughter and chatter of a group of nobles belonging to Duke Raymond's faction. He was an elder Alpha, owning the prosperous southern territories, and had always harbored a covert resentment toward the absolute dominance of the royal family. As Iris drew near, Raymond intentionally veered off course, the brawny shoulder of a high-ranking Alpha thrusting heavily against her slender frame. The silver tray in Iris's hands crashed down, the parchment scrolls scattering across the cold marble floor. Mocking laughter erupted instantly, wafting the arrogant and oppressive scent of superiors. "Oh dear, look who is tracking filth into this royal corridor." Raymond leaned down, his voice laced with utter ridicule, his narrowed eyes staring intently at the dull gray iron mask upon her face. "Does a deformed creation like you actually dare to serve His Majesty? Or have you used some sort of dark sorcery to bewitch him, you iron-faced monster?" Iris did not reply. She silently knelt, her scrawny hands trembling slightly, but she quickly forced herself to remain calm to retrieve the parchment scrolls. Her forbearance did not satisfy them, on the contrary, it only stimulated the feral cruelty of the corrupt nobles. A count accompanying Raymond stepped forward, the heel of his leather boot brutally stomping down on Iris's outstretched hand, grinding it hard against the stone floor. A throbbing pain shot from her knuckles straight up to the crown of her head, yet Iris bit her lip hard, refusing to let a single groan escape. She knew what they wanted. They wanted her to weep, they wanted her to beg, and they wanted to use her humiliation to prove that Gideon was mistaken to keep someone like her by his side. "Take your filthy hand off the realm's property," Raymond sneered. He leaned even lower, his hand covered in gold rings brutally gripping Iris's iron mask, intentionally yanking it hard as if to rip it right off her flesh. "Let me see what a hideous face lies beneath this rusted sheet of iron that requires such concealment." Before Raymond's hand could fully touch the lock and clasp of Iris's mask, an invisible and terrifying pressure abruptly slammed down upon the entire corridor. The surrounding space seemed to freeze, the air temperature plummeting to the point where everyone's breath turned into plumes of white smoke. It was the aura of an Alpha King, the supreme bloodline power that could force the weak to kneel flat against the ground in an instant. From the far end of the corridor, the tall silhouette of Gideon emerged beneath the twilight. His jet-black cloak embroidered with gold thread fluttered with each of his resolute steps. His eyes, which naturally bore the cold ash-gray of northern mists, were now blazing with the black sparks of ultimate fury. The scent of cedarwood and tempests was so suffocating that it choked the throats of everyone present. "Raymond," Gideon's voice was low, not overly loud, yet it resonated like rolling thunder before a storm. "Who permitted you to take it upon yourself to punish my servant?" Duke Raymond's face instantly drained of color. The pressure from Gideon bore heavily upon his shoulders, causing his knees to tremble before buckling onto the cold stone floor with a heavy thud. Those following him were no exception, all knelt in terror, their heads bowed close to the ground, not a single soul daring to look up at the furious king. Gideon walked over to stand in front of Iris. He did not look at the nobles, instead, he leaned down to grasp her trampled hand. Upon seeing the bruises and blood oozing from the tips of Iris's fingers, the dark fire within his body seemed to awaken like a savage beast, ready to lease out and incinerate everything. He pulled her up, shielding her completely behind his broad back. Your Majesty." Raymond stammered, beads of sweat rolling down his forehead as he attempted to resist the pressure. Your servant was merely disciplining an insolent attendant. She is not worthy." "Whether she is worthy or not is for me to decide, it is not your place," Gideon cut him off. He took a step forward, the heel of his boot stomping straight down on Raymond's right hand, the very hand that had intended to touch Iris's mask. A dry, sickening crunch echoed along with the agonizing shriek of the arrogant duke. Gideon showed no mercy, he ground his foot down firmly, his cold gaze pinning Raymond as the man writhed on the floor. "Banish Duke Raymond from the royal council, and confiscate half of his assets in the southern kingdom to be turned into the public treasury. Take him away, out of my sight." Gideon delivered the punishment ruthlessly and decisively. The royal guards immediately rushed in, dragging the agonizing Raymond and the nobles accompanying him out of the corridor. This severe punishment served as a thunderous warning sent to the entire dynasty. That night, the atmosphere within the Alpha King's bedchamber was uncannily tranquil. Only the crackling of pine wood burning in the fireplace cast a warm, golden glow, contrasting completely with the chill of the stone walls outside. Iris stood beside the bed, holding a porcelain jar of ointment and several strips of clean gauze. Her fingertips had been superficially treated, yet her mind had still not recovered from what had transpired in the corridor that afternoon. She had never imagined that Gideon would publicly punish a powerful duke for a lowly maidservant like her, pushing his relationship with the noble council into a tense confrontation. Gideon sat on the edge of the bed, his royal cloak discarded, leaving only his white silk shirt slightly unbuttoned, exposing his firm chest and the faint scars from previous battles. He looked at her, his gaze devoid of the brutality and bloodlust of the daytime, replaced instead by a tenderness laced with a hint of fatigue. "Come here, Iris," he called softly, his voice warm like a spring breeze blowing through a frozen forest. Iris hesitated slightly, taking small steps toward him. Instead of letting her apply the medicine to him as usual, Gideon reached out, gently grasping her wrist and pulling her down onto the cushioned chair opposite him. He took the jar from her hands, his rough fingers carefully scooping a bit of the smooth cream, then gently applied it to her swollen, red fingers. His actions caused Iris's chest to tighten. A tyrannical king, an alpha king feared by the entire continent, was now bowing his head, cradling the hand of a maidservant with the utmost reverence. The contrast was so immense that it made her feel breathless. "Does it hurt?" Gideon asked. He did not look up, still intently bandaging her hand. "I am fine, Your Majesty. These wounds are nothing." Iris's voice was muffled behind the iron mask. "You should not have antagonized Duke Raymond for my sake. His faction is very powerful. This will affect your authority." Gideon paused his movements. He looked up, staring directly into the two deep sockets of the iron mask, where Iris's eyes wavered with layers of complex emotions. "This throne is a cursed cage, Iris," Gideon said, his hand leaving her fingers and slowly moving up, lightly touching the cold metallic edge of the mask on her cheek. "I care nothing for their factions. If I cannot even protect the only person who brings me peace, then what meaning does this crown hold?" Though his touch was separated by the thick layer of iron, Iris could still feel the warmth transferring from his palm. Gideon's cedarwood scent enveloped her, stimulating the mate bond slumbering deep within her veins. Her heart pounded frantically. She wanted to cast off all shackles so she could show Gideon the kind of woman she truly was. "They are right," Iris whispered, a tear involuntarily escaping from the corner of her eye, rolling down the cold iron surface. "I am merely a deformed creature. I have no scent, no countenance. I am a stain beside you." "Silence." Gideon cut her off, yet his voice bore no anger. He drew closer, the distance between them narrowing to the point where she could feel his warm breath fanning against her face. "I do not see with the eyes of those blind nobles. When I touch you, I do not see this cold iron layer. I see a pure soul, a refreshing energy that rescued me from the hell of the dark fire. To me, you are my soul's salvation." The sudden tenderness and the declarations filled with affection from the ruthless king were like a torrent, completely destroying the final defensive barriers that Iris had painstakingly built over the years. She wept, her warm tears streaming through the crevices of the mask, blurring the candlelight in the room. In this private space overflowing with love, she wanted to embrace him, wanted to lean close to his ear to tell him that she was his destined mate, that she was beginning to love him to the point of no return. Yet right in that moment of soaring emotion, when their chests pressed tightly against one another and their hearts beat to the same frequency, the image of High Witch Maeve and the ruthless curse upon her brother's life materialized like a malevolent specter. The iron mask suddenly became as heavy as a death sentence, dragging her back to grim reality, reminding her that this truth and this love were the very weapons that would destroy everything she cherished if she dared to step over the boundary. Chapter 6: The Traps of Royal Power. The mist of early winter began to shroud the sharp spires of the palace, bringing a bone-chilling cold. But the outdoor chill was nothing compared to the suffocating, tense atmosphere enveloping the royal council chamber. A new crisis had erupted immediately after Duke Raymond's banishment. The aristocratic faction loyal to the old man was covertly aligning, exerting fierce pressure upon the throne. Amidst being besieged by internal strife and foreign threats, another horrific event struck. The dark fire fever within Gideon's veins was showing signs of losing control, ravaging his body with an ever-increasing frequency. Precisely at the moment when the throne was at its most unstable, Maeve publicly unleashed her strategic card. She leisurely strolled into the grand hall, not in the posture of a subject, but with the demeanor of one who held the destiny of the entire dynasty. Standing before Gideon and the council of nobles, Maeve presented a silver box engraved with intricate ancient runes, inside of which contained a deep purple liquid emitting a haunting aura. She declared it to be the elixir refined from the source of darkness, the only thing capable of completely suppressing the dark fire burning the king. However, the price Maeve demanded plunged the entire hall into a terrifying silence. She forced Gideon to marry her, officially crowning her as the supreme queen of the kingdom. The plot to usurp the throne since the era of the former king, after years of hiding in the shadows, had now fully revealed itself. If Gideon agreed, the royal bloodline would be entirely manipulated by dark sorcery. If Gideon refused, the black flames would incinerate him to ashes before winter's end, and the kingdom would fall into a miserable, leaderless state. While Gideon was imprisoned amidst agonizing choices in the Grand Hall, at a hidden corner deep beneath the dark dungeon of the palace, Iris was facing a true nightmare. The dilapidated storage room, where sunlight never touched, suddenly became extraordinarily cold. The moment Iris stepped inside, the thick wooden door behind her instantly slammed shut on its own. From the shadows of the damp, moldy stone walls, the silhouette of the witch Maeve slowly materialized. Her eyes flared with a feral green light, a sinister smile vividly apparent on her youthful face, ageless thanks to dark magic. "You have done quite well for a loyal dog, Iris," Maeve spoke, her voice like a venomous serpent couthering through dry leaves, filled with irony and contempt. "I thought a brat wearing a deformed iron mask would soon be thrown into the tiger's den. I never expected you could use that lowly body to bewitch the Alpha King. He even offended the entire council of nobles for your sake." Iris took a step back, her slender back hitting the rotting wooden planks of the old bookshelf. Her survival instinct kicked in. She attempted to steady her breathing, refusing to expose any weakness before the one who had slaughtered her entire clan. She clenched her hands into fists, straining to keep her voice from trembling behind the iron mask. "What are you doing here? This is the royal palace. If His Majesty knows you are harming his person." "His person?" Maeve laughed out loud, her shrill laughter echoing across the dark dungeon, harboring infinite madness. "Do you truly think you are something important? You are merely a sacrificial pawn in my game, you bitch. Let me remind you, the mask on your face was created by the deathly hands of your mother, but the leash keeping your little brother alive is in my hands." The moment the words left her mouth, Maeve raised a scrawny hand with sharp black nails toward Iris. She began to mutter incantations in a bizarre, ancient tongue. Instantly, a surge of black aura shot from her fingers, wrapping tightly around the iron mask on Iris's face. An ultimate agony struck like a thunderbolt. The iron mask, inherently cold, suddenly turned scalding hot as if it had just been pulled from a forge. The heating metal began to cling tightly to the flesh of her face, white smoke rising along with a burning stench. Iris could not endure it. She collapsed onto the stone floor, her hands clutching her chest, her tragic scream choked in her throat because Maeve's dark magic had tightly locked her larynx. Pain radiated through every nerve, like thousands of needles piercing her brain. Maeve drew closer, her sharp heel stomping heavily upon Iris's tattered hair, forcing her face, bearing the scalding iron mask, flat against the filthy ground. She leaned down, whispering the most venomous words into her ear. "Can you smell your own cleansing blood boiling? Remember, this is merely a gentle warning. I know you are Gideon's destined Omega. I know your blood can extinguish the dark fire. But I also want you to know that the moment you dare to betray the oath, the moment a single drop of your blood touches Gideon's body to save him, or if you take this mask off on your own, the most ruthless dark fire will instantly shift direction, incinerating your little brother's soul and flesh right on the spot." The image of her small little brother, the only living relative Iris had left in this world, surfaced in her mind. That child was completely innocent, he could not bear the brutality of the dark curse. Her mother's sacrifice, the blood of the Holy Omega clan, all would become meaningless if her brother had to pass away. Maeve withdrew her dark magic. The iron mask returned to its original freezing state, yet the wounds beneath the iron layer still throbbed with immense pain. She stood up straight, adjusting the folds of her luxurious cloak, looking down at Iris with the gaze of a superior holding victory firmly in her hand. "The grand wedding between Gideon and me will take place in 3 days. I want you to stand right beside the throne as the wine-serving maid. You will have to watch with your own eyes as your destined man drains my wine, dedicating this entire kingdom to me, while you can do nothing but remain silent. That is the most perfect revenge against your noble priest lineage." Maeve turned her back and walked away, her silhouette dissolving into thin air. In the dark room, Iris lay curled on the cold stone floor, tears mingled with blood from within the iron mask slowly dripping onto the ground. Helplessness and agony were like pincers tightening around her heart. She loved Gideon, she yearned to liberate him from the torment of the dark fire. But the distance between her and him now was not merely an iron mask, it was the very life of her poor little brother. In 3 days, the royal wedding would take place. Gideon's kingdom, and even her own fate, all were standing on the brink of complete annihilation under the hand of the witch. Chapter 7: Silent Sacrifice. The frost of the days drawing close to the grand ceremony dyed the ancient pine trees surrounding the palace a stark white. Inside the main hall, the atmosphere was manifold more stagnant and freezing. The decision to wed the witch Maeve in exchange for the elixir to suppress the dark fire had been announced before the Council of Nobles, sparking an underlying undercurrent. Gideon sat upon the throne, his handsome countenance like a sculpted statue, his ash-gray eyes cold and devoid of a single shred of emotion, yet deep within his chest, the wolf instinct of a king was roaring with immense resentment at this humiliation. That morning, Iris was ordered to bring herbal tea into the king's private study. When the heavy, thick wooden door slammed shut, the space was left with only the two of them. Gideon stood by the large window ledge, his tall, broad back facing her in solitude. He did not turn around. The cedar wood fragrance that was usually warm now reeked heavily of a bitter tang and an unusual brutality. "Set that thing down, then get the hell out." Gideon's voice was low, gravelly, and cold enough to freeze the entire kingdom. Iris paused slightly, her scrawny hands tightening around the silver tray. She felt the fateful mate bond link vibrating with painful beats, as if his soul was screaming to push her away. She took another step forward, her voice choked behind the iron mask that was still stained with blood from Maeve's suffering the previous day. "Your Majesty, are you truly going to perform the grand ceremony with that woman?" Gideon abruptly turned around and lunged close to Iris. A colossal alpha pressure slammed down, tightly constricting her chest and causing the silver tray in her hands to crash onto the stone floor. The ceramic cup shattered into numerous tiny shards, the dark brown liquid spreading patchily like streaks of blood. He brutally pinched her chin, forcing her to look directly into his eyes, which were blazing with the sinister black sparks of his venom. "Since when does a lowly, iron-faced maid like you have the right to question my actions?" Gideon roared, the muscles on his face twitching violently as he utilized the entirety of his rationality to suppress the fever of the dark fire tearing him apart. "Do you think a few touches, a few words of pity from you can alter my destiny? You are nothing more than a temporary amusement for me to forget the pain." The pain from his gripping hand was nothing compared to the blade plunging straight into Iris's heart. Looking deep into Gideon's blazing ash-gray eyes, Iris suddenly caught a desperate tremor, an ultimate despair concealed behind his ruthless facade. She understood now. He was intentionally pushing her away. He knew Maeve was a venomous serpent, he knew that if she continued to remain by his side, that woman would use her new power to crush her into ashes. This cruelty was the final wall of protection that the lonely king reserved for the girl he cherished. "Get out of this palace this very day. If I still see your grotesque iron face tomorrow, I will personally throw you into the cage of starved tigers." Gideon released his grip and turned his back, his voice trembling for a fraction of a beat that only the intuition of a destined Omega could discern. Iris knelt upon the stone floor, silently gathering the shattered pieces. She did not weep, she did not beg, nor did she explain. The agony had transcended the boundary of tears. She stood up, bowing her head to her king one last time, and gradually backed out of the room. Walking through the long, wind-swept corridor, Iris knew she would not depart. The mission of the Holy Omega bloodline, the dying wish of her late mother, and her profound love for Gideon did not permit her to flee like a coward. If Maeve wished to turn the grand ceremony into the day she ascended to the pinnacle of power, then Iris would turn it into the burial ground of dark sorcery. As the night twilight descended, Iris sneaked into the forge's basement, where Iris's younger brother was being hidden away under the surveillance of Maeve's dark magic. The scrawny child sat curled up in the corner of the wall, his round eyes brimming with terror upon seeing his sister's familiar iron mask. Iris rushed over, tightly pulling her brother's small shoulders into her embrace. The sole biological connection left in this world caused a surge of fierce courage to rise within her. "Sister, that witch woman said you are going to pass away tomorrow, right?" The child whimpered, his tiny hands clutching tightly onto the tattered fabric of Iris's maidservant dress. "She said if you remove the mask, the black fire will incinerate me. I am so scared." Iris hoisted her younger brother's small face up, her gaze through the two cuts of the iron mask becoming more steadfast and radiant than ever. She gently stroked his hair, her voice warm and deeply persuasive. "Listen to me, Toby. The bloodline of our clan was not born to submit to the darkness. Mother sacrificed herself to protect us, and tomorrow, I will bring an end to this curse. I need you to be incredibly brave. Tomorrow, when the grand ceremony begins, hold tightly onto the stone pendant that Mother left behind, and focus your entire mind to call out my name. We are going to gamble a life and death game against the witch together." Toby looked into his sister's gaze, his fear gradually replaced by absolute trust. The child nodded, gripping tightly onto the precious necklace that Iris had just placed into his hand. The distance between life and death was a mere day away, but maternal love, sibling bonds, and loyalty to the kingdom had forged into one, creating a plan that was insane yet magnificent. Iris stood up, her shadow stretching long against the ancient stone wall. She returned to the maidservant room, lit a small candle, and prepared a sharp piece of quartz crystal, concealing it inside her sleeve. The iron mask that had clung tightly to her flesh for over a decade now felt like a cocoon awaiting the day of its rupture. Tomorrow, before the witness of the entire pack, before the sacred sanctuary and the throne of the Alpha King, she would personally tear apart this protective layer. Even if her flesh were to be destroyed, even if the curse might turn to incinerate her brother, she still believed in the supreme cleansing power of the priestess bloodline and the fateful mate bond with Gideon to protect them across the boundary of the Grim Reaper. The greatest upheaval of the dynasty was counting down by the hour, and the lowly, iron-faced maidservant would be the one to personally overturn the Witch Supreme's chessboard. Chapter 8: Sacrifice at the Altar. The light of the grand ceremony brought no warmth from the sun. Instead, it was smothered by bleak, slate-gray clouds that hung low over the spires of the grand cathedral. The entirety of the council of nobles, the pack elders, and the ruling class had gathered in full, packing the luxurious pews aligned on either side of the main aisle. The atmosphere was solemn, thick with suffocating tension and the oppressive scent of raw power. Everyone held their breath, waiting for a historic turning point where the tyrannical Alpha King would be forced to bow his head and accept a political bond with a dark witch. At the center of the cathedral, Gideon stood majestically beside the stone sacrificial altar. His royal ceremonial attire, embroidered with gold thread, only served to accentuate his tall, muscular physique, yet his handsome face was as cold as winter frost. His ash-gray eyes stared straight into the void, devoid of a single ripple of emotion. Beside him, the witch Maeve looked stunning in a nuptial gown of pitch-black silk velvet, the onyx jewelry glittering around her neck and wrists like coiled serpents preparing to strike. A triumphant smirk played on her lips as her sharp gaze swept over the crowd, savoring the taste of the ultimate power that was about to be hers. Hidden in a shadowed corner right behind the throne stood Iris, holding a silver tray that bore the royal goblets for the nuptial wine. Beneath the wide folds of her maid's uniform, her hand tightly gripped the sharp quartz shard she had prepared the night before. The cold iron of the mask pressed heavily against her unhealed wounds, but the pain could not shake her resolve. From the distant expanse of the forge warehouse, she could feel the invisible bond with Toby vibrating. Her little brother was clutching their mother's stone fragment, ready to face this life-or-death gamble. "O sacred wolf pack, before the witness of our spiritual ancestry," the old high priest's voice rang out, solemn and echoing through the soaring stone arches of the cathedral. "Let the grand ceremony of the royal blood binding begin." The moment the high priest finished his sentence, Maeve subtly turned the silver ring on her finger. An invisible, thick wave of dark magic abruptly discharged into the air, directly triggering the black fire curse embedded deep within Gideon's core. She wanted to break his last shred of resistance right in front of all his subjects, forcing him to his knees to beg for her antidote. A storm of black fire erupted furiously inside Gideon's veins. Dark, thick veins bulged violently along the young king's neck and temples. His ash-gray eyes instantly shifted into the pitch-black void of a demon. Gideon dropped one knee onto the marble floor, propping both hands firmly against the ground as low, agonizing roars were choked back in his throat. His Alpha King aura, distorted by the dark magic, flared out so fiercely that the nobles in the front rows recoiled in horror, and a panicked commotion began to ripple across the cathedral. "Obey me, Gideon, and you shall be released from this burning torment," Maeve leaned close to his ear, whispering in a mocking, utterly satisfied tone. Watching the kingdom's supreme, solitary ruler writhing in excruciating agony, Iris felt her heart violently squeezed. She knew the fateful moment had arrived. There was no more room for hesitation, no path for retreat. Her steps decisively broke away from the shadows of the throne, advancing straight toward the royal altar before the stunned eyes of the chaotic crowd. "You maid! What do you think you're doing?" "Fall back immediately," a guard roared, but the chaotic pressure radiating from Gideon's body ensured that no one dared to rush forward to stop her. Iris stood before Gideon, the man of her destiny now kneeling prostrate on the ground, the heat from the black flames radiating from him as if to burn her to ashes. From the opposite side, Maeve glared at Iris, her eyes flashing with a venomous gaze as she mouthed a silent warning about Toby's life. But Iris merely looked back at her with the absolute resolve of a priestess of the sacred Omega bloodline. Raising her hand with every ounce of strength left in her being, she drove the sharp quartz shard hard into the rusted iron lock at the nape of her neck. A dry, cracking sound echoed as the lock snapped. Iris paid no heed to the flesh-tearing agony as the rusted iron edges that had clung to her face for over a decade were violently ripped away. Using both hands, she brutally smashed the metal shackles, liberating herself from the cage of fate with her own two hands. The heavy iron mask crashed down, striking the marble floor with a resounding clang. At that exact moment, streaks of pure, fresh blood poured from her face, soaking into the floor of the sacred cathedral. The blood oath was officially sealed, and the entire expanse of the palace prepared to welcome the awakening of a supreme power that had been hidden for far too long. Chapter 9: The Divine Blood Liberated. As the final fragments of the iron mask collided with the cathedral's marble floor, an invisible shockwave abruptly swept through the entire space. There was no sound of structural collapsing, yet the stone walls of the grand cathedral seemed to tremble under a spiritual pressure unseen for 100 years. From Iris's body, the fateful Omega scent that had been imprisoned for so long suddenly exploded into the air, cool, crisp, and pure like morning dew atop a sacred mountain, carrying the subtle breath of bittersweet wormwood and late-blooming snowdrops. Wherever the fragrance traveled, the dark tendrils of witchcraft's smoke instantly vanished. The purifying blood inherited from Iris's priestess mother poured from the wounds on her face. Yet, miraculously, when those drops touched the stone floor, they did not stain it like an open wound. Instead, they glowed with a soft, soothing silver light. The powerful cleansing energy surged into swirling vortices of light, enveloping Gideon's convulsing body. The black fire that was furiously ravaging the king's veins seemed to have met its millennial nemesis. The thick, dark veins on his neck and temples began to soothe, and the demonic pitch-black void in his eyes gradually receded, yielding to the original ash-gray gaze of a supreme alpha king. The tyrannical fever that had tormented him since his youth was extinguished completely and permanently in a single, deep breath of heaven and earth. The venomous curse that had imprisoned the dynasty was officially broken. Everyone present in the cathedral, from the most conservative pack elders to the proudest nobles, held their breath in unison. They were not only astounded by the disappearance of the black fire, but were completely subjugated by the magnificent spiritual power radiating from the seemingly lowly iron-masked maid. It was not the physical dominance of an alpha, but the absolute majesty of a supreme Luna, the one who held the soul and origin of the entire pack. No. Impossible. This cannot be. The witch Maeve stumbled back, her eyes wide with horror and shock. Her ageless, youthful face suddenly cracked with the withered wrinkles of old age as her dark magic was abruptly snuffed out. She stared intently at Iris, who was no longer a deformed pawn for her psychological suffering, but a majestic priestess possessing divine blood who had liberated the kingdom. Her arrogance and the flawless coup she had plotted for so many years collapsed entirely in a single moment. Amidst the ruins of the dark magic, Gideon slowly drew himself up to his full height. The lineage strength of the Alpha King was no longer repressed, the blood of the pack's leader erupted with an unprecedented, supreme power. His scent of cedarwood grew formidable, dominating the entire space and blending perfectly with Iris's snowdrop fragrance into a completed symphony of the mate bond. When he beheld the bleeding yet exquisite face of his true mate, the wolf spirit within him let out a soul-shattering roar. He recognized her, his sole savior, the girl who had sacrificed both her blood and flesh to redeem him from hell. Iris. Gideon's voice was deep and low, yet it carried a brand of authority that could compel all of creation to submit. In her ultimate frenzy and despair, Maeve suddenly let out a grotesque shriek. Summoning the last remnants of her fading power, she channeled a blast of black fire from her palm, thrusting it straight toward the forge district beneath the palace, where she could still feel the curse's lingering tether to Toby. She wanted to incinerate the child to make Iris pay the price. "How dare you?" Gideon roared. His speed was so immense that the naked eye could not track it. Though he took a staggered step, his colossal aura instantly formed a protective barrier of royal energy. It shattered Maeve's black flame the moment it left her hand, shielding Iris's younger brother flawlessly. Concurrently, a blast of Alpha King pressure from Gideon's hand struck the witch square in the chest, hurling her violently against the stone wall of the cathedral. Maeve collapsed to the ground, her breath ragged. The shadow magic gradually dissipated before dying out completely. Stripped of her witchcraft, Maeve transformed into a wretched, withered old crone before losing consciousness. The moment the perpetrator collapsed, another miracle unfolded. Having fulfilled its sacred duty to the kingdom, Iris's purifying blood turned back to soothe its own master. The raw wounds and tears left on her face by the rusted iron edges began to close beneath a gentle shroud of silver light. The smooth porcelain skin of a purebred Omega gradually revealed itself, utterly flawless. The true countenance of the Supreme Priestess was restored to its inherent perfection. Gideon walked over to Iris. He slowly dropped to one knee before her, an act an Alpha King had never done for anyone. He lifted her trembling hand, placing a reverent kiss filled with profound love upon her fingers, his ash-gray eyes gazing up at her with absolute adoration. Witnessing this grand spectacle, the old high priest was the first to fall to his knees. Following him, the entire council of nobles and the pack bowed their heads in submission. Thunderous chants of Supreme Luna began to echo, reverberating through the quartz arches, ending a dark era and dawning a new chapter for a liberated dynasty. Chapter 10, Dawn of the New Kingdom. The harsh and bleak winter finally yielded to the awakening of the kingdom. The first warm rays of spring sunshine spun golden honey over the palace spires, melting the frost that had locked the dynasty in ice for decades. Along every road leading into the capital, the vegetation that had withered under dark magic for years suddenly burgeoned with buds and sprouts, bursting with a vibrant, vital green. The kingdom no longer had to endure storms of black fire that scorched the skies, nor the foul stench of brimstone from dark sorcery. The purification of the divine Omega blood had restored the air to its original state, bracing, fresh, and pure. By now, the decadent and corrupt sins of the former king's generation had been thoroughly erased. Gideon, the new monarch wielding supreme power and a healed consciousness, spent the opening months of his reign restoring order. He purged the entire corrupt system of the noble council and dismantled the opportunists who had once groveled at the feet of the witch Maeve. More importantly, however, he guided the pack back to its long-neglected spiritual roots. On a morning flooded with the light of dawn, a sacred ritual unprecedented in the history of the dynasty was held in the ancient forest, the holy ground nestled deep within the royal territory. This was a place where thousand-year-old oaks stood tall, their roots plunging deep into Mother Earth's energy veins. Thousands of pack members, from fierce alpha warriors to purebred omegas and noble lineages, gathered in full, standing solemnly beneath the lush, green canopy. At the center of the forest, upon an ancient, moss-covered stone dais, Gideon stood welcoming the sun. He no longer wore the heavy royal ceremonial robes or the oppressive black cloak of his past. He wore only a simple white silk shirt that revealed his broad chest, topped by his noble crown. His eyes were filled with resolve and majesty, devoid of the shadows of loneliness and hatred. From the path carpeted with snowdrops, Iris walked slowly forward. Her appearance seemed to make time stand still. She was draped in a pristine white silk gown, her long, wavy hair falling loosely over her slender shoulders. Her face, once imprisoned behind a bleak and rusted iron mask, was now fully revealed beneath the spring sunlight. Her skin was fair and unblemished, her eyes as clear as autumn water, and her gentle smile illuminated the entire sacred forest. Her fateful omega scent drifted out, cool yet intoxicating, blending flawlessly with Gideon's cedarwood scent to forge an unbreakable protective barrier for the entire pack. Beside Iris, Toby walked with a proud posture. The gaunt, terrified child from the dark cellar of yesterday now wore the attire of a young duke, his cheeks rosy and his eyes shining with newfound faith. The boy had been reunited with his sister, no longer needing to hide in the dark, no longer chained by venomous curses. Standing directly before the pack, Toby was invested with a noble title by Gideon, becoming the future protector of the priestess lineage. Gideon stepped down from the stone dais, reaching out to catch Iris's small but resilient hand. Together, they stood at the pinnacle of the holy ground, where the spiritual core of the kingdom was fully restored. Gideon looked deep into his mate's eyes, his hand tightening gently, conveying a warmth and a vow etched into the very soul of an alpha king. Gideon's voice echoed across the vast forest, deep, warm, and authoritative, causing every blade of grass and leaf to vibrate in harmony. The darkness has passed, and the dawn has arrived. The woman standing beside me is not only the savior of my life, but she is the sole supreme Luna of this kingdom. From this day forward, our love shall know no shackles, and this dynasty shall be guarded by freedom, compassion, and the eternal light of purification. Gideon leaned down, gently placing a kiss upon Iris's lips before the eyes of all creation. It was no longer a hurried, painful touch through cold iron by a sickbed, but the absolute convergence of two destined souls who had walked through life and death together. The mate bond flared brilliantly, sealing permanent sovereignty between the Supreme King and his magnificent Luna. Beneath the ancient forest canopy, thousands of resonant wolf howls rose in unison, blending with the cheers of the pack, echoing all the way to the blue skies above. The new kingdom had been reborn from the ashes of the curse, ushering in a new era brimming with healing, prosperity, and an undying love that would endure through time.